Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're joining us from. I am joined today by Erin and Shaker. I'm Shilpa. I'm a product marketing manager on our Microsoft Purview data loss prevention solution. Erin and Shaker, do you guys want to do a quick introduction?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I'll go first. Hey, everyone. My name is Shaker Palta, and I'm a product manager in the Microsoft Information Protection team, and me and my team focus on data loss prevention. Looking forward to the session today.
Hey everyone, my name's Erin Miyake, and I'm a product manager in Microsoft Purview focusing on insider risk management. So super excited to be here today.
Thank you both. So while we wait for questions to come in, I have something to ask both of you. So I'll start with Erin first. Erin, we announced adaptive protection a month or so ago. What is the most exciting thing for you about adaptive protection, and what do you think makes it different than other solutions out there?
It's a good question. Let me think. I think, there's a couple of things that get me really excited. The first is, we know that we're in this environment where security teams are trying to do more with less. There's increasing data security risks. And with adaptive protection, I really think that it helps enable and empower organizations to really maximize and optimize how they address data security risks with this adaptiveness. So instead of some of the manual processes that we hear our customers doing today to try to focus in some of their data loss prevention controls and data security controls on the riskiest users, and the time that it takes and the effort that it takes to do that, we can make it more intelligent, more dynamic, and more automated for them. So that's one. And then I think the second is just with adaptive protection in Purview, one of the things that I think is super cool is that it's really out of box. And so it all comes as part of Microsoft Purview with insider risk management and data loss prevention. You don't have to set up several different agents and do a bunch of very complicated and time-consuming configuration. It can work for you relatively, frictionlessly to get set up. So.
Yeah, and I think that's really, really cool. I will underscore your point, Erin, the idea that you don't need to do any complicated setup, like the amount of time and costs that can save just because it's cloud native and you don't need any additional agents. So yeah, folks, please check out. Shaker, I'll come back to you, but we actually have a question from Dean here. Are there plans to include Azure services in the insider risk management solution? Erin, I'll let you answer that one.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure. Let's see. Any specific services that Dean is referring to? I'm not sure if we can ask for a little bit more detail.
Yeah, we can. And while we do that and wait to hear back from Dean, Shaker, I'll post this next question to you. So we had a ton of announcements on the DLP side for Microsoft Secure. Could you share like your favorite ones?
Well, that's a real tough question. But to answer your question, it's absolutely right. Lots and lots of great customer value, great announcements coming through. I'll summarize the announcements across three themes or three buckets, right? The first is depth of protection, where we are saying that more deeper protection capabilities, starting from the ability for all our customers to start detecting sensitive content and images through optical character recognition. We are also expanding the fingerprinting support across not just Exchange, but also all of our other locations like SharePoint, OneDrive, endpoint devices on Windows, Teams, etc. And you can not only have full fingerprinting capabilities, but also partial fingerprinting to detect content from parts, sensitive content from parts of the document. The next big capability in this theme is just-in-time protection or our proactive protection capabilities, which apply at the time of egress. Um, Another interesting capability is the ability to protect password protected files that we've announced as well as part of the announcements. The next theme, and I'll go quick because I know there are much more questions to answer, but the next interesting theme is the extension of our protection capabilities to additional planes. We're extending support to virtualized environments like AWS workspaces, Windows virtual devices, Hyper-V platforms, Citrix, and also the ability to protect your files on network shares that are accessible from your endpoint devices. So the protection that we provide for files stored on network shares is very similar to the protection capabilities that are available for files that are on your endpoint devices. Last but not the least, one really interesting theme of announcements is empowering admins to be more efficient, where we have a lot more tools on the investigative experience as part of our Purview portal, which allows admins to not only view the full file evidence, but also the matched conditions for all of their sensitive files that are found on endpoint devices or across different locations. And in addition, for our endpoint DLP, especially, we have another interesting announcement which allows admins to really manage and transparently view what kind of devices, what is the health of the devices, configuration status of the devices, and they can manage their setup effectively.
Awesome. That's really a long list. For people who were counting, we announced around 10 new capabilities. So go check out the blog, aka.ms/DLP blog. So Erin, we were able to receive clarification on Dean's question. And the question is, all of the services in Azure could be at risk to an insider. But where Dean would start would be the services that affect overall governance and compliance.
Got it. Yeah, so I think there's a couple of ways I think about how we incorporate Azure. So the first is like detecting the activity in Azure, which to Dean's point, I think we're always listening to understand the scenarios that folks are prioritizing and are of interest in an insider risk space. And so definitely, please continue to share your feedback on some of those specific scenarios and types of signals that you think are relevant for insider risk scenario, whether that be data security or more in the security policy violation or sabotage space. From Azure itself, there's a few signals that we're using today, which I'll just kind of call out. So the first is we have a detection called potential high impact user. And so what that allows us to do is help the analysts and investigators prioritize insider risk alerts and where they may want to review an alert and take response first based on the potential impact of that user. And the way that we determine if a user was potentially high impact is based on a few different signals, including how they're interacting with sensitive data compared to others in the organization, but also some of the signals from Azure, including Azure AD organizational hierarchy. So how senior they are in an organization, how many cumulative direct reports they have, their level from the top of the organization, and also their Azure AD directory role. So if they're a global admin and they become an insider risk and they have some signals and insider risks that may look potentially risky, then an admin and an analyst can quickly see this and prioritize their efforts and take that in the lens of context as they're reviewing the activity.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Erin, we do have another question for you. Will adaptive protection be coming to GCC and GCC High?
Yeah, so we will be keep an eye out on the public roadmap, and we'll continue to share the dates as they crystallize for GCC and GCC High.
Yes, but the short answer, yes,
Yeah, yes,
eventually,
yes.
yes. We will share timelines when we have that more firmed. Awesome. So, Shekhar, we talked a lot about what we announced. What are some of the key things that might come in the DLP space that you are very excited about?
Oh, that's a great question as well. There are a bunch of announcements that are in the pipeline, features that our team is working on right now. Again, I would say keep an eye on the announcements on the public roadmap page. We are going to have a number of announcements again across the three themes that we talked about: depth of protection, which would allow our customers to really protect all kinds of sensitive data consistently across all of their locations in their digital estate. And then we'll continue to extend our breadth of protection as well, which will allow customers to not only protect their Windows devices, for example, or the traditional M365 workloads, but also go beyond to Mac devices, for example. We already have a bunch of capabilities for Mac OS that was announced as part of the recent announcements, and we are going to continue to strengthen our protection capabilities in that area. In addition, in breadth of protection, we also announced our support for virtualized environments. We are going to expand that support to more types of virtualized environments as well as to other planes. And without committing on any timelines right now, I would say more updates will be available on the public roadmap site. And we are also going to keep doubling down on our investments to make the admin experience even more comprehensive, to ensure not only to ensure that the incident management experience, for example, for DLP, becomes really comprehensive. We are doubling down on our investments in that area, and you'll see a lot more announcements in the future in that space. Plus, we are making the admin experience for device management for your endpoint DLP setup even more richer, to allow you to go to one single dashboard to view which devices are healthy, which are not. Take actions on those devices which are not healthy, and also self-diagnose and self-heal. So you'll see a lot more announcements in that space as well.
So, in short, watch out for our announcements. Watch out for our public roadmap. There is lot to work on in DLP space. Lots more exciting things coming down the pipeline. Erin, a question for you. So, we talked about adaptive protection and how your DLP policies can automatically adapt to the risky activities or that's happening. What about a decrease in the risk level?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So, one of the things that some of the feedback that we've heard from customers is, once a user has hit a certain risk level, you may not want them to stay at that risk level forever, right? And that's part of this, the value of this adaptiveness is not only can a user ratchet up in risk as they perform risky activities, but at some point, that risks should decrease. So if you've set up a super restrictive DLP policy to block users with an elevated risk level, for example, you don't want to leave them there forever. So there's a few ways that that risk level will decrease. The first is over time. And so if we see that this user has not committed additional risky activities over a period of time, then eventually that risk level will decrease back to no risk level. So they won't be in scope for those DLP, adaptive DLP policies anymore. The second one is there's a manual way that you can go in and manually remove someone's risk level. So, for example, we've heard some customers, sometimes there's corner cases in your organization where there's a user who, yes, their activity looks risky, but for whatever reason, it's sanctioned due to some exception, or maybe it's someone really senior in your organization who has a reason to be doing this. And so you want to manually remove that risk level, you can do that. And then the third is, all of this is part of inside our risk management solution. And so, as part of your regular analyst and investigator workflow in insider risk management, if you do have analysts and investigators that are reviewing alerts and they dismiss an alert because, let's say, it's benign or the impact is low, then that action of dismissing an alert will also remove that user's risk level.
Thank you for that explanation. So there are multiple different ways that that could be handled. Sounds like. Erin, there's a question for you in the chat from Lee, who says that IRM or insider risk management is great in correlation of signals in Microsoft 365, in showing the relations of the events that actually rise those alert. What is your suggestion on how to include the SOC team, which is not natively working on the Purview portal, but maybe working out of Sentinel? I'm reading this as, are there integrations of insider risk management alert experience with Sentinel?
I see. Yeah, so I think I'm also reading through the question, sorry, just to make sure
Yeah,
that
no
I'm wrapping
worries.
my head around it.
Mhm.
So, yeah, so that's a great question. Um, I think there's a couple of different scenarios where we see this being relevant. First is if you have an insider risk team that's working in the Microsoft Purview portal and you have a separate SOC team who's doing some of this cybersecurity analysis. And let's say you want to collaborate across those two teams. And then the second is if you have, maybe you're using Sentinel as your single pane of glass and you have, one team that's looking at everything or everyone's looking in Sentinel. So I think we do have, the short answer is we do have a connector right now. So you can export your alerts from Insider Risk Management into Sentinel so that you have that single pane of glass. And I think that that's what a lot of our customers who use that model have been doing. In terms of kind of that cross collaboration, I'd be interested to hear more of what those scenarios might look like. But a lot of times it is like using that connector to export the alerts in Insider Risk Management and then having the folks that are in the Purview portal every day. There's a functionality in the cases that you can add a contributor. So if there's a specific case, maybe that you need some additional consultation, then you can add them to access that specific case.
Got it. And we do support that on the DLP side as well, right, Shaker? Like you could move all of your or import all of your DLP alerts into Sentinel. So now you can look at them in a unified fashion.
Absolutely. So we have a very native, intuitive way of doing that. So we have the Microsoft 365 Defender connector in Sentinel, which allows you with one click to import all of your incidents in Sentinel from Defender. Now, if you have your DLP incidents, DLP alerts set up, DLP policies with alerts set up, they are automatically today flowing into Defender, and through the Defender connector in Sentinel, they with one click, all of those incidents will also be available in Sentinel. And we have a documentation in place as part of our public docs, which talks about how you can use Sentinel for your end-to-end DLP incident investigation.
Awesome. Shikhar, this next question is for you. What options do we have for DLP on our on-premise resources?
So if you go into Microsoft Purview Compliance Center and you create a DLP policy, you will see uh, a location which is called as on-premises file repos, which allows you to create your DLP policy and protect documents on your on-premises SharePoint repositories, for example, and sort of put in place protection capabilities, again, in the same unified, as a part of the same unified DLP policy. We have that available.
Awesome. So in short, we do cover your on-premises resources, and you can choose that as you would choose any other location, say your devices or your Exchange or SharePoint.
Absolutely.
Um,
Actually,
uh,
I saw another question that we might have missed. So I'll read out the question. I read something about document fingerprinting. Can you explain a
Mhm.
little how that works? So document fingerprinting is a technique to take a document, take a sensitive document, and convert it into a sensitive information type, right? And you can put in place controls that detects um, uh, either a partial match of the document or an exact match of the document at the time of egress and prevent that action from happening. And this capability, this detection capability, is available across all of our. Again, it's a part of our announcements that we made recently, and it is now available across Exchange, your emails in Exchange, your documents in SharePoint, OneDrive, endpoint devices, as well as your Teams sharing as well. So, what this effectively means is for sensitive documents like, let's say, your customer forms, your W-2, or your patent templates, for example, um, uh, that are specific to your organization. You can create a fingerprint, use it as a sensitive information type when you create your DLP policies, and put in place protection actions to either block or audit or alert when a partial or an exact match for that document happens.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you for catching that I missed that question. Erin, I have a question for you. So we're talking about adaptive protection a lot. What licenses um, do customers need for that?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, any license that gives you access to both insider risk management and DLP. And so that would include anyone with a Microsoft 365 E5 or compliance E5 or any combination of the other licenses that entitle you to both of them. So there's a insider risk management add-on, and if you have that in combination with an add-on or another license that gives you access to DLP, then that will um, give you access to adapter protection.
Awesome. Thank you. There is a very interesting question that we just received. And maybe Shekhar, you and I can tag team this one. Is DLP a security or a compliance thing? It depends and it's confusing. Sometimes Microsoft treats it as a compliance, but then alerts go through Defender Connector, which is a security thing. Reconciling these discrepancies will be helpful. So I'll start and then I'll hand over to Shekhar here. The way we are thinking about DLP is at its core, it is a capability or a technology that will allow you to prevent exfiltration of sensitive data in your organization. Now, this sensitive data can egress through multiple different channels. The way we are thinking about DLP is taking a bigger, broader picture of data security. So think about it as you have a safe, and every time you go into a hotel, where do you keep your most prized possession? Is inside the safe and with a number on it, right? But sometimes the safe can be broken. So those are like external threats, which is what security defender helps you do, is like prevent your crown jewels from the external threats. But then you also have threats that might arise from within your organizations on that data. So you want to make sure that your data is protected in a way that even somehow, if the external threats happen, the external actor or the bad actor is not able to steal your data or exfiltrate your data. And you can do that almost like a defense in depth approach here. So you can encrypt your data. You can make sure that it's not leaving through egress channels. So maybe the bad actor is trying to extract your data from, and I'm making this up, so Shekhar will correct me if I'm technically wrong here, but like trying to extract it from a very specific egress channels. If you don't have DLP capabilities on those egress channels, you will lose your data. So the way we think about it is a comprehensive approach. It's not one versus the other. You need both to build that defense and that strategy. Shekhar, anything you would like to add?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very interesting question, and it's a topic of debate actually. Is DLP a security or a compliance thing? Well, I would not be controversial here and just say that, well, DLP is a data security and data protection thing. Right now, some organizations might want to do that because they are required to do it because of certain regulations that they're governed by. But now, a lot more organizations are recognizing the importance of data protection and data loss prevention. uh, and just data protection, not just data loss prevention. Data protection is a sort of an initiative that goes beyond just data loss prevention. That is where the Purview suite of products comes into the picture as well. Now, and organizations are quickly realizing that data protection is goes much beyond what regulations require them to do, because there's so much intellectual property. Now we have, the BYOM, so BYOD model, people working from home, bring their own devices, and data protection has become top of mind for CISOs, for organizations across the world, right? So now, coming to the point where why did Microsoft think about making available these DLP alerts as part of Defender. Now we've heard a lot of feedback from customers about the need for a unified incident queue. There are a lot of organizations that have a unified SOC team, um, which sort of investigate incidents beyond just security and look into DLP, IRM, and so many other incidents. Now, what we want to move to is a unified incident queue, which we have available in Defender, with a lot of really interesting investigative and remediation tools that become available for DLP as well. But at the same time, we've also made sure that, hey, you have controls in place for you to choose exactly who in your organization gets to see the DLP policies. For example, if you have if you don't have a unified SOC team and you have, let's say, a set of DLP analysts that only look at DLP alerts as their day-to-day job, you have controls in place to ensure that they can go into the Defender queue, but have the rights to look at, investigate, remediate only DLP alerts and not be able to look at. So you have all of these granular controls in place. Plus, you also have the flexibility of seeing all of your incidents, alerts across security, DLP, into a unified incident queue, while at the same time leveraging the rich investigative and remediation tools that Defender has to offer.
Awesome. Thank you for that additional context. I will say one last thing here. We've been on this journey as a company, right? Like, we talked about compliance and we realized that it is not just regulatory compliance. It spans beyond that, which is why also we rebranded our compliance suite to Microsoft Purview, to signal and to communicate that it's not about just regulatory compliance. With that, I think that's all the time we had today. Aaron, Shekhar, thank you so much for joining us, for answering these questions. Any last minute quick thoughts for our audience? Like, how can they get started? Aaron, go first.
Aaron, go ahead.
So adapter protection, there should be a card on Microsoft Purview homepage. Super easy to get started. You can use the easy button, as we call it, to quickly get set up. So I'd recommend that you visit that, and some of the links that we've been also sharing throughout the session.
Awesome. Shekhar.
Thank you, everyone. This was a bunch of interesting questions we got to answer today. I would end by saying that, in my view, data protection is an iterative journey. Microsoft Purview Data Loss Prevention offers you, along with adaptive protection, offers you all the tools you require to have a very solid framework of protection set up for your organization. Please, leverage the host of announcements, host of new features that we have announced very recently, and happy to answer any questions you might have going forward. Thank you so much. This was a great session. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for joining us.